We had an extremely important decision. The U.S. Supreme Court was evenly split on a decision involving a religious charter school that was seeking to receive public funding. The decision was a 4-4 ruling, and therefore the Oklahoma State Supreme Court decision was upheld. So what does all this mean? What does it indicate for not only this case, but maybe other similar cases? What can we expect from the whole charter school, religious school movement going forward? We're here to discuss this is Erin Smith. Erin is the Associate Counsel at First Liberty Institute, which represents Oklahoma's Superintendent of Public Instruction, State Board of Education, and State Department of Education in this case. Erin, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Jody. I'm glad to be here.
Wow, this is a huge case, and I think a lot of us are scratching our heads as to what does this all mean at this point. So let's kind of begin. What are the overall arguments for and against public funding of charter schools, and why is this particular case so divisive?
Yeah, so I think just to start, the argument for religious charter schools really is that parents deserve to choose what kind of school they want to send their children to, and that includes religious schools. And so the state of Oklahoma opened up public funding for charter schools, and anyone could apply. But then the Attorney General decided that religious schools should not be applying and would not be qualified to receive these state funds, which goes against what the Supreme Court has said about the United States Constitution, and it allowing things like religious charter schools or allowing religious institutions to receive public funding when it's made available to all. The state of Oklahoma, in opposition to St. Isidore, argues that St. Isidore, the charter school, is a state actor, and so it would be in violation of the Establishment Clause, which is an incorrect interpretation of the Establishment Clause. But we don't know how the Supreme Court would have ruled, because they released that per curiam opinion 4-4, and so we don't even know who was on which side.
Yeah, so what does this mean? Is this, I would think, and I'm hearing people say that a 4-4 decision means more than likely this is going to come back to the Supreme Court at some point. Is that an accurate assessment, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. The fight really is far from over. The silver lining of the 4-4 ruling is that this limits the ruling to just being in Oklahoma. It doesn't speak to whether or not religious charter schools will be valid in other states. And so we expect to see this exact same thing be right before the court very soon.
So during the oral arguments, I remember when all that was taking place and we reported on it at that point, but what were the justices' main concerns at that point? What did they need to hear to make them go one way or the other?
Well, really, it seemed that their main focus really was, are you treating this school differently because they're religious? And so we heard argument, and yes, that St. Isidore was being treated differently by the state of Oklahoma because it was religious. Now, our client understands the law and wanted to follow the Constitution in the way that the Supreme Court has interpreted it, but was stopped from doing so by the Oklahoma Supreme Court and the Attorney General.
So doesn't this really, because that's my recollection too, and all the oral arguments were taking place. That's why I was kind of surprised at the 4-4 decision yesterday. Were you at all surprised by that, by the way?
We were very surprised, yes.
Yeah, I think most people were, and particularly when you look at it from the backdrop of the oral arguments and what seemed to be the biggest concern for the justices. Where does the whole discrimination argument come into this? I mean, like you mentioned, anyone could apply to be a charter school. This is something that provides an opportunity for parents to have yet another choice in education, and yet it seems as though only religious schools are disallowed. Is that not discrimination?
It is, and that's exactly right. It is discrimination simply because the charter school is religious. And so there is no other explanation. St. Isidore is ready to give high quality education to students who don't have access to high quality education like the Catholic Church offers. And so they wanted to make that free to students across Oklahoma using an online school, and they're being discriminated against because of their religious character.
So does this pull the plug on St. Isidore or just the public funding aspect of it?
So St. Isidore would be allowed to operate as a private school should they choose to, should they have private donors lined up to fund them. But you're correct in that the Oklahoma Supreme Court decision does limit their ability to receive the charter school funding.
Okay, on a broader perspective, why is this such an important case? What's the significance here?
I think it's important because, right, parents want to be able to send their kids to really good schools. And part of having really good schools is the opportunity to have choice. Choice between sending your kid to a public school, to a private school, to a charter school that uses these innovative teaching methods like St. Isidore wanted to do. And so ultimately, it really does come down to, don't we want to live in a freer society? Don't we want to live somewhere where we can make those kinds of decisions and value our faith? And so that's really the bottom line is, let's give people more access to education and more freedom to exercise their religious liberty.
Well, I couldn't agree more. When you talk about, and we've only got about a minute or so left, but when you talk about probably this is going to come back to the Supreme Court, any way to anticipate what kind of time frame, what would need to happen for the Supreme Court to revisit this?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. As far as, if there's a case already going on, if there's something in the works, you would need a charter school, a religious charter school, and you would need the charter school to be told no or to get sued in some capacity. And so there's really no telling how long. It could be very quick, and it could be a few years.
Erin Smith, I want to thank you so much. You're the Associate Counsel at First Liberty Institute, whom we love a great deal. And thank you so much for your incredible work. We are grateful for you coming on Washington Watch and breaking this extremely important case down for us. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you.
Happy Memorial Day. Thank you.